Art history, like most other disciplines in the agonizing humanities, has for the past 40 years been trying to find ways to renew itself. This is understandable and may still succeed. If it does, no doubt renewal will come from different directions and from a positive conflict between opposing notions of what it takes to talk convincingly about depictions and their uses. I've no interest then in claiming that the art history I do, the kind you'll be treated to in the next hour, is a privileged way forward. But one negative judgment I shall risk stating up front. I don't think art history has profited much, or will profit in future, from a random search after ways of proceeding borrowed from other practices of knowledge, from a kind of methodological or theoretical ambulance chasing. In the 40 years I've been teaching the subject, I've got used to turning up every 5 years or so at an important gathering of others in the business and finding that more or less everyone in the room has somehow, since the last time I talked to them, the osmosis is always mysterious, entered a brand new conceptual space which has rendered the terms and ambitions of 5 or 6 years ago unthinkable, irrelevant, vaguely embarrassing. Once upon a time, all serious scholars knew how to line up the binary oppositions and deduce the transformational algorithms on the Sistine ceiling. But not for long. Suddenly, ideological state apparatuses were what art history was about. Then subject positions and interpolation and disidentificatory practices and signifier sliding over signified. Then there was the mirror stage and the male gaze, followed by performativity in Madonna videos, and the panopticon with its pal, the parergon, then subalternity and the vices of Eurocentrism, then the punctum and the mise en abîme. Where does this get us to in time? Oh, ages ago, maybe as long as 8, 9, 10 years back, before the fall, before 9/11, in the olden days, when top of everyone's reading list were picture theory and a child is being beaten. Since then, a lot more methodological water has flowed smoothly under the bridge. I leave it to you to bring the buzzwords and sacred texts up to date. Fashions are inevitable in every discipline. I'm enough of a disciple of Walter Benjamin to relish their dance with death, but also enough of a Benjaminian to think that the rattle of newness grows louder and faster in order always to fend off the question, what is the newness for? What is its object? What are the questions, the real deep difficulties that the wand of methodology seems constantly to wish to keep at bay? Several, in my view. And again, I make no claim that the question that has preoccupied me for 40 years is the only or even the predominant one. Nor, by the way, do I claim to be impervious to fashion. I've done my time with binary oppositions and spectacle and phantasmagoria and the unreliability of reference. Fashion is fertile. The problem isn't solved by trying to hide from it or condescend to it, but by trying to put it to use, to ask of the new framework or apparatus, how could this help with whatever it is in art history that turns out to be truly a project, as opposed to a set of available theory motifs? How might it help with the question or questions that really concern me, that seem to go on selecting me rather than me selecting them? In my case, the question is obvious. I still remember it coming up first for me when I went to Paris regularly as a teenager and saw the great Poussin retrospective in 1960. I was 17 then, and the equally wonderful Delacroix retrospective 3 years later. I was reading voraciously at the time and thought I might end up as a critic of literature, but pictures overtook me. I didn't understand why or how. I knew they offered a unique kind of pleasure, but I also knew, I thought I saw, that they offered kinds of appraisal of the nature of things that struck deep in ways that even poetry didn't quite equal, or at least they struck differently. They gave the world meanings, and they gave form to the very process of producing meaning for others in ways that language or organized sound or dancing bodies didn't. That's what I saw in Poussin. When, a little later, I began to read what art history had to say about such matters, about the conditions and structure of pictorial communication, I have to say that I thought it was mostly pitiful. Art historians either avoided the topic altogether, here the contrast with musicology seemed to me scandalous, or they reduced the question of meaning in the visual arts to an almost entirely text-based theme and variation model. And their conception even of the text, maybe especially and fatally of the text, struck me as a young Levisite and Empsonian as almost ludicrously confident that in language, any particular image or statement X, apart from some noise on the message, could be taken to equal meaning Y. The question that took hold of me, in other words, was that of the specificity of depictions, the difference between complex image formations, image configurations, and complex sentences or texts, and the conditions under which such image configurations were understood or misunderstood by those who bothered to look at them. Of course, the latter conditions were partly social and political. This mattered a lot to me, but partly because politics mattered a lot. But I now realize that one main reason I've